to cover a few points that I covered in the local Quran conference in Masjid Baitul Sami on the importance of recitation of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد وصلنا لهم القول لعلهم يتذكرون. In chapter 28 verse 52, Allah Almighty says that, and we have indeed thoroughly conveyed to them the word that they may be admonished. In commentary of this verse of the Holy Quran, Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizwan has answered a question that sometimes arises in the minds of people who study and recite the Holy Quran, which is, why is there a unique style to the recitation and to the organization of the verses of the Holy Quran, which makes it unique from the way other books are written, their style and the way that they are organized. Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizwan writes that ab sawal paida hota hai ki ilhami kitabon mein दुनिया की तमाम किताबों से निराली तरतीब क्यों रखी जाती है? इसका जवाब ये है कि इसमें भी कई हिकमतें हैं. So Hazrat Muslim Maud explains that there are many wisdoms in why there's a difference in the way that the sentences, the way that the chapters of a revealed book are organized in comparison to the way that worldly books are organized. First he says, इस तरतीब से सारे कलाम से दिलचस्पी पैदा करनी मद्देनज़र होती है. अगर इल्हामी किताब की तरतीब इस तरह हो जिस तरह मसलन हदाया की तरतीब है कि वज़ू के मसाइल ये हैं, निकाह के मसाइल वो, तो आम लोग अपने अपने मजाक के मुताबिक उन्हीं हिस्सों को अलग करके उन पर अमल करना शुरू कर देते और बाकी कुरान को ना पढ़ते. मगर अल्लाह ताला ने सारे मसाइल को इस तरह फैला कर रख दिया है कि जब तक इंसान सारे कुरान को ना पढ़ ले, मुकम्मल इल्म उसे हासिल ही नहीं हो सकता. Huzur explains that firstly, the reason is that we take interest in all of the subjects of the Holy Quran. If the revealed books had a similar order as the different books of jurisprudence, wherein there's one chapter for ablution and another chapter on marriage and another chapter on something else, then a person would only read those areas that they have personal interest in, and they would remain deprived of knowledge on the other subjects. However, the Holy Quran has spread these subjects out so that a person can only get a full understanding by reading the entire Holy Quran. So it is to get this broadness of understanding. But also this spreading of the subject is not just to prevent us from being able to separate the subjects. Obviously that's not the reason. But there are many more and deeper wisdoms. Huzur explains that लोगों को गौर और फिक्र की आदत डालने के लिए भी अल्लाह ताला ने ये तरतीब इख्तियार की है. अगर आम किताबों की तरह इसमें मसाइल बयान कर दिए जाते तो लोगों का जहन इस तरफ मुंतकिल ना होता कि इन मसाइल के बारीक मतालिब भी हैं. वो सिर्फ सत्ती नज़र रखते और गौर व फिक्र से महरूम रहते. मगर अब अल्लाह ताला ने इन मसाइल को इस तरह फैला दिया है और एक दूसरे में दाखिल कर दिया है कि इंसान को उनके निकालने के लिए गौर और फिक्र करना पड़ता है और उसे मालूम होता है कि ये एक समंदर है. Huzur explains that another wisdom is so that we come into the habit of reflection on the deeper meanings of the Holy Quran. If this book was arranged like ordinary books, then a person's attention would not turn towards the fact that all of these different teachings have a very subtle purpose behind them, and we would just look at them on the surface and we would not reflect. However, Allah Ta'ala has spread these subjects out and He has incorporated them into one another so that a person has to reflect in order to find their true wisdoms. Now here, what we see in the Holy Quran and what we see throughout the teachings of Islam is that the scriptures and the teachings are interrelated, they are interconnected. All the teachings of Islam are in one way connected to the other, they are not independent of one another. The teachings on purity, they relate to prayer, they relate to ablution, but they also relate to spiritual purity, and then the different types of purity that are necessary in our daily lives. So the subject of purity, as an example, from the spiritual and physical realm is something that spreads onto many teachings that are related to different things, whether it comes to Hajj or the fasting, or whether it comes to the observance of prayer. So one point that we have to remember when looking at the vastness of the teachings of Islam is that there is a central wisdom, there is a central purpose, and then all these different things are branches from that basic root, from that source and that purpose. So if every subject was separated independently, then our mind would not turn towards this subject, it would be deprived of wisdom. We would just have a vast amount of information, but that information would not have any depth to it. This is also one of the reasons why the Holy Quran is as brief as it is. Now, if the purpose of the Holy Quran in Islam was just to give us information, then the Quran would be thousands and thousands of volumes long. In fact, the tafsir of the Holy Quran, and if we were to combine all the different tafsir, then they can be spread into thousands and thousands of volumes. But the reason why the Holy Quran is so brief in such a short book is because it contains those principles. It contains that root and the basic center of Islam. And then after this, everything spreads from there. Now, when it comes to information, we see that books that are comprised of information, even a page that's 100 pages of information, it's very easy to read. If you or I were to have a book of information that was 100 pages long, we wouldn't consider it anything. It would take a couple hours to read it. In an afternoon, we would gather what's in there and we would be able to retain most of it and be able to have a strong hold and idea of what is being conveyed. But there are other books like poetry. If a person were to write 100 pages of poetry and they were to give it to us to read it, then that 100 pages is extremely heavy. It's nothing compared to 100 pages of ordinary information. 100 pages of poetry is a person's entire life work, of their reflection on life, their deep understandings, their sentiments, their feelings. So 100 pages of poetry is equivalent to 10,000 pages of information in an ordinary book or another book of a different style. So it shows that when there is depth, then there is a huge amount of concentration. And to understand it takes reflection, to see how all these different subjects are connected, how there's an emotion, there is a feeling behind it. So this is what the Holy Quran is. The Holy Quran is a book of depth. And the fasir on the Holy Quran, they are the ones that contain the vastness of information. So if the Holy Quran had been organized like a book of information, then it would not have been able to achieve this purpose. So here also, when a person asks that why is the Holy Quran not organized like ordinary books, why is it not ordered into chapters and so on and so forth, a person could say the same thing about poetry. Nobody ever thinks of saying that. Why is it that this poem is not organized from one couplet to the other and it seems to jump from one subject to the other? Or why does each poem not follow directly with one subject and then change to the other? The fact is that when we read poetry from the perspective of emotion, then it makes perfect sense and it flows. But when a person looks at it like they look at a book of information, then of course it's not going to make sense to them. So the Holy Quran is to be looked from the correct perspective of the depth that it seeks to convey to us. And Huzur explains that ये तरतीब इसलिए भी इख्तियार की गई है ताकि खशियत इलाही पैदा हो. मसलन अगर यूँ मसाइल बयान होते कि वज़ू यूँ करो और कुल्ली इस तरह करो, इबादत इस तरह करो, इतनी रकतें पढ़ो, तो खशियत इलाही पैदा ना होती. जैसे इबादत वगैरह के तमाम मसाइल कुदूरी और हदाया वगैरह में मौजूद हैं, मगर कुदूरी और हदाया पढ़ कर कोई खशियत इलाही पैदा नहीं होती. लेकिन वही मसाइल जब कुरान में आता है तो इंसान का दिल अल्लाह ताला की खशियत से लबरेज हो जाता है, इसलिए कि कुरान इन मसाइल को खशियतुल्लाह का एक जुज़व बनाकर बयान करता है. और दरअसल नमाज और रोज़ा और हज और ज़कात वगैरह मसाइल का असल मकसद तक़वा ही है. बस कुरान तक़वा को मुक़द्दम रखता है ताकि जब इंसान को ये कहा जाए कि वज़ू करो तो वो वज़ू करने के लिए पहले ही तैयार हो. इसी तरह जब कहा जाए कि नमाज़ पढ़ो तो इंसान नमाज़ पढ़ने के लिए पहले ही तैयार हो. अगर कुरान में नमाज का एक बाब होता तो उससे पढ़कर खशियतुल्लाह पैदा ना होती. So Huzur explains that another reason for this order of the Holy Quran is to create fear within our hearts. When a person reads the books of jurisprudence, then although he learns the same information that is contained to an extent in the Quran, but it does not create love or fear of Allah Ta'ala in a person's heart. But the Holy Quran has presented it in such a way that before it explains these different issues, it prepares our heart for it so that we are then prepared to accept it when we come upon that subject. So the purpose of the Holy Quran is to appeal to that soul within us, that spiritual reality, that emotion within us. And then when the emotion in the land is fertile and it is prepared, then when the seeds are placed in it, it is already ready to receive it. So the teachings of the Holy Quran and the commandments are conveyed in a way where the primary purpose is to affect our hearts. It is not just to convey to us information, but it is that when that information is conveyed to us, then we are already on the same wavelength that Allah Ta'ala wants us to be on. And we were previously ready to accept that teaching. We were just waiting for it to be conveyed to us and for it to be announced so that we can begin to act on it. So Huzur says that गर्ज इल्हामी किताब चूँकि इस्लाह को मुकद्दम रखती है, इसलिए वो सती तरतीब को छोड़कर एक नई तरतीब इख्तियार करती है जो जज्बाती होती है। यानी कल्ब में जो तगय्युरात पैदा होते हैं, इल्हामी किताब उनका ज़िक्र करती है। ये नहीं कि वो वज़ू के बाद नमाज का ज़िक्र करे, बल्कि वो वज़ू से रूहानियत, तहारत और खुदा ताला के कुर्ब की तरफ इंसान को मुतवज्जो करेगी, क्योंकि वज़ू से तहारत के जज्बात पैदा होते हैं। फिर जब नमाज का मसला आएगा तो ये नहीं होगा कि अल्लाह ताला नमाज के मसाइल बयान करना शुरू कर दे, बल्कि सजदा और रुकू के ज़िक्र से जो जज्बात इंसानी कल्ब में पैदा होते हैं, उनसे फ़ायदा उठाते हुए वो उसे अपनी तरफ मुतवज्जो करेगा, ताकि जो जज्बात भी इंसान के अंदर पैदा हों, उनसे वो ऐसा असर ले जो उसे खुदा ताला के करीब कर दे। Huzur explains that the purpose of a revealed book is to bring about reformation within us, and that is the primary purpose. And so that is why it is left that surface order and organization of a regular book, and has taken a new way of presenting the message to us, which appeals to our emotions and follows that wavelength. And so when it presents a teaching, then, for example, if it wishes to teach us ablution, first it describes the importance of purity and how it is a means of nearness to Allah Almighty, and then it describes to us the action of wudu and ablution. And also when Allah Ta'ala wishes to teach us about salat, about prayer, then He does not simply straight go into describing the different actions of prayer and what is obligatory, but rather first we are described the philosophy of prostration, of bowing down towards Allah Almighty, of the spiritual state that there is in prayer, and of falling down and breaking down before our Creator. And then when the teaching of prayer is given, then our heart is previously prepared for it. And so it is to appeal to our hearts that the Quran is organized in this way. Now after this, Huzur gives an example that the waves of our heart is the waves to which the Holy Quran speaks. And this is something we can observe in our conversations as well. When we're having a conversation with someone who we barely know or we perhaps don't even like, then we just go through a formality. We have chapters organized in our mind, that I'm going to first start off by talking about the weather, and then when we run out of something to talk about there, then talk about how his day was the previous day. Maybe I'll think of something that we both have in common. In this way, our conversation is organized from beforehand into chapters. It jumps from one thing to the other in a very rigid and very awkward way. But when there is an emotional connection between two people who have known each other for decades, who are very intimate with one another, then if a third person overhears their conversation, then it's very interesting. Sometimes it's hard to follow, because there's a lot of inside jokes. There's a lot of unspoken things, a lot of things that are just within understanding, that are between the lines. And the reason is that when two people are on the same wavelength, then their conversation has a completely different flavor to it. Then it follows the waves of emotion. They go from one subject to the other, not jumping randomly, but the way in which they are reminded of previous experiences, different feelings that they shared, and that is a beautiful and a conversation that brings us peace. It brings us happiness. That's what we look for when we engage with someone who we understand and someone who understands us. So when we're on the same wavelength with another human being, that's when we genuinely enjoy a conversation. It doesn't take any effort. It flows without effort, without any effort on our part. So this is also what has to exist with the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran is not ordered like an ordinary book with different chapters that abruptly go from one subject to the other, because it is not an awkward conversation with someone who we've never met before, but it is meant to be an intimate conversation with our Creator. And in order to enjoy its recitation and understand its order, we have to be on the same wavelength, by which the remembrance of Allah is in our hearts, the seeking of forgiveness of Allah Ta'ala is within our hearts. That is why the Holy Prophet ﷺ set the example that when a verse of the Quran would glorify Allah Almighty, then he would glorify. When it would mention the punishment of Allah Almighty, then he would seek forgiveness. So there was an action and a reaction. There was a wavelength of the heart that was flowing through the revelation and through the recitation and tilawat. So this also is an insight on how it is that we recite the Holy Quran. So the purpose of the Holy Quran is to appeal to our hearts. It is not to put out a whole bunch of information for us to just memorize and to retain, and for us to gain something that is only on the surface. If Islam was concerned with the surface, then it would be an extremely vast book that would take thousands of volumes to cover. But Islam is only concerned with depth. That's the primary purpose. That's what the Quran is focused on. And so that is why the Quran, while on the surface being a very brief book, it does not cover a whole lot of surface area, but it has a huge amount of depth. And that depth is what comes with the connection of the emotion and the connection with the heart. So the Holy Quran can be enjoyed and it can be understood when we understand the purpose for which it has been revealed. And when we understand the purpose for which it has been revealed, then its order and its presentation brings forward a whole new beauty that that previously was hidden to us. So when people raise this allegation, and also sometimes when people have this genuine question that when I recite the Holy Quran I have difficulty following, it's a very different style. It's hard for me to understand what's being conveyed. So this is the reason that in the same way that we have to adjust ourselves when we read a worldly book like poetry, we can't just go from reading a book about law, a very dry book on jurisprudence or law or constitution, and then switch over to poetry and expect to understand it reading it in the same style. You have to shift gears even when we're reading worldly books, one that appeals to our mind and the other that appeals to our heart. So also there is indeed of the shifting of gears when we read a book of spirituality that appeals to our heart and appeals to our soul. So may Allah Almighty grant us an understanding of the Holy Quran, and also may we be granted an enjoyment in the recitation of the Holy Quran. So now if there's any questions that anyone has, then we can briefly address them.
I have a little question that, that we can write Quran Sharif on walls, like calligraphical. So the reason I asked this question, that I saw they wrote so much Quranic verses in Granada, Spain, which I was thinking maybe they're thinking we're gonna write this La Ghalib Allah and so many different, almost whole Quran, and they wrote it like a different calligraphics, like a Kufi, regular ones. They have like 7, 8. Yeah. So the rulers, they thought maybe we can blessed our this is their purpose of writing these verses. Or like we write these verses in Faisal Mosque in Pakistan and other places. So what's the purpose of writing these verses? To be blessed at building, or people can read that? And I don't think so that King Palace, ordinary people can go there. So this was my question.
So the reason that we do it in our Ahmadi Masajid is for the purpose of zikr, for reminder. The Holy Quran itself says that it is a reminder for us. And so those verses are put there so that they can remind us. I mean, this is something that Huzur has advised as well, that we should, something that we are struggling with, we should put a relevant verse of the Holy Quran, even to put it on the wall, relevant teaching, so that it's always before our eyes, we are reminded of it. So the reminder is the purpose. Now to go into whether a place becomes blessed because a verse of the Holy Quran is written there, the blessings of Allah Ta'ala come with our intentions. It doesn't just come with an object being there, just because something happens to be written there. Now, if a person with a good intention writes verses of the Holy Quran seeking the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala, then of course it carries blessings just like anything else does. But why it is that they did this in Spain or other places, there could be many reasons for it. The thing is that throughout Islamic history, there has been a significant taboo on imagery because of its association with idolatry early in Islam. Now, although imagery is something that is not forbidden entirely, in principle at least, it's only forbidden where it leads to idolatry, but there was a strong taboo that existed throughout Muslim history. And so for this reason, the way that artists expressed their artistic expression was through calligraphy, because all of us as human beings in every human society have an artistic capacity that needs expression. It cannot be suppressed, nor should it be suppressed. So since the people and the Muslims in these societies did not sculpt, they did not paint, they abstained from imagery because of perhaps it had some value in it, but a very strict adherence to this taboo on imagery. So they expressed this artistic expression within themselves in the calligraphy of the Holy Quran. Now, this is something that we see in Christian history as well. For example, in the Renaissance, the greatest painters and sculptors, they painted scenes that were of of Christian history, of Christian saints, of Jesus, of God, of heaven, of angels, and things like that. It isn't because they were necessarily religious or righteous or saintly people. It's because the church paid the most to paint religious imagery, and also because this is the way that it was just a part of their culture. So it just had become a part of Christian culture to express one's artistic expression in religious imagery. So in the same way, there were many Muslim great artists in Muslim history who expressed themselves in calligraphy of the Holy Quran because it was a culturally popular way of doing it. And so Allah knows best their motivations, but this is one of the reasons why this calligraphy was something that was so used, and it is found in such a vastness in the masajid and all the places where art was expressed.
Good question.
When I attended the VT class in 1973, at that time we were told that these 5 verses which are written in Masjid Mubarak, those are copied from Baitul Haram, Masjid Aqsa, from there. La Ghaleba Illallah, Allah Nuru Samawati wal Ard, there were 5.
Okay.
So we were told at that time that these are copied from there, and these are special subjects, enlightening some special, you can say that subjects and chapters which are to be as Allah Nuru Samawati wal Ard. This is special. So they were told that these are copies for that.
Okay. It'd be interesting to find out when those verses were, written in Masjid-e-Haram, whether it was done by the Holy Prophet ﷺ himself, or if it was done by, the Tabi'een or the great people afterwards, and it was adopted as a tradition within Islam. Because, for example, with Khutbah Isaniya, the second part of it, which is Ibadallah Rahimakumullah, that's actually something that was added by Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who was Mujaddid of the 1st century. So also it may be that this was something that was added in the Kaaba by one of the Mujaddideen or one of the great saints, and it was then became a part of tradition. And then when Hazrat Masih Maud Islam added it to Masjid Mubarak, that's all we need, because that means the Masih of the latter days endorses it. In the same way that the second part of Khutbah Isaniya, when Hazrat Masih Maud Islam has endorsed it, then we know it is from Allah Ta'ala, even if it came through a Mujaddid and not through the Khulafai Rashideen or the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I doubt that it was the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself who wrote those verses in Masjid-e-Haram. At that time, it just wasn't a part of the tradition to write, the Holy Quran, especially in that way. But maybe it was done afterwards, and Hazrat Masih Maud Islam endorsed it with his actions. Okay, so we can have Salatul Isha then.